The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of the double-wide trailer, casting long shadows across the cramped living room where 8-year-old Sarah Beth Thompson sat cross-legged on the worn carpet. Her small hands clutched an old acoustic guitar that was nearly as big as she was, its wood scarred from years of use but still capable of producing the sweetest sounds. "Mama, listen to this," she called out, her voice bright with excitement despite the circumstances that had become their daily reality. Emma Thompson emerged from the kitchenette, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, dark circles under her green eyes, telling the story of too many sleepless nights. At 28, she looked older, worn down by the weight of single motherhood and financial struggles that seemed to multiply like weeds after summer rain. "What is it, baby girl?" Emma asked, forcing a smile as she wiped her hands on a dish towel that had seen better days. Sarah Beth's fingers found the familiar chords, and she began to sing in a voice that was remarkable for someone so young. The melody of "Fancy" filled the small space, each note clear and true, carrying an emotional depth that seemed impossible from someone who had lived such a short life. "Fancy was my name," Sarah Beth sang, her eyes closed in concentration, completely lost in the music. Emma felt her breath catch in her throat. Every time her daughter sang, it was like witnessing something magical. The child had never taken a formal lesson, had learned everything by ear from the old country CDs that her late husband, Robert, had left behind. Robert had been the dreamer in the family, always talking about Nashville and the music business, filling Sarah Beth's head with stories about country music legends. "That was beautiful, sweetheart," Emma said, settling down beside her daughter on the floor. The trailer's thin walls meant she could hear Mrs. Patterson next door starting her morning routine, the sound of her television news program filtering through. Sarah Beth opened her bright blue eyes, so much like her father's had been. "Do you think Daddy can hear me when I sing?" The question hit Emma like a physical blow, just as it did every time Sarah Beth mentioned Robert. It had been 2 years since the accident at the construction site, 2 years since their world had turned upside down. The workers' compensation had barely covered the funeral expenses, and Emma's job at Henderson Manufacturing was barely enough to keep them afloat. "I know he can, baby," Emma whispered, pulling Sarah Beth close. The child smelled like the strawberry shampoo Emma bought with coupons, mixed with that unique scent of childhood innocence that made her heart ache with fierce protectiveness. Sarah Beth leaned into her mother's embrace, the guitar resting across both their laps. "I dreamed about him last night. He was standing on a big stage, and he told me that someday I'd be up there too, singing for lots of people." Emma closed her eyes, fighting back tears. Robert had always believed Sarah Beth would be a star, had spent hours teaching her chords and encouraging her to sing. It was both a blessing and a curse. The child's talent was undeniable, but dreams didn't pay rent or put food on the table. "Mama, are you okay?" Sarah Beth asked, tilting her head to study her mother's face with the perceptiveness that children often possessed. "I'm fine, honey. Just thinking about Daddy and how proud he'd be of you." Emma stood up, glancing at the clock on the kitchen wall. It was already 8:30, and she needed to be at the factory by 9. The Henderson Manufacturing plant was a 15-minute drive from their trailer park, located on the outskirts of Millfield, Tennessee. The small town had seen better days, with many of the local businesses struggling to survive as larger corporations moved operations overseas. Emma had been lucky to keep her job on the assembly line for as long as she had, but lately she'd heard rumors that made her stomach churn with worry. "I need to get ready for work," Emma said, moving toward their small bedroom. "Mrs. Rodriguez said she'd keep an eye on you today, remember?" Sarah Beth nodded, already returning her attention to the guitar. "Can I practice the new song I heard on the radio yesterday?" "Of course, but keep the volume down. You know how some of the neighbors get." As Emma got dressed for work, she could hear Sarah Beth's voice through the thin walls, working through the melody of what sounded like another Reba McEntire song. The child had developed an obsession with the country music queen, somehow connecting with songs that spoke of struggle, perseverance, and overcoming obstacles. Emma sometimes wondered if Sarah Beth understood the deeper meaning behind the lyrics, or if she simply loved the melodies and the strength in Reba's voice. Emma's work uniform consisted of dark blue pants and a polo shirt with the Henderson Manufacturing logo embroidered on the chest. The clothes were comfortable enough for standing on her feet for 8 hours, but they also served as a daily reminder of how far her life had strayed from the dreams she'd once harbored. Before Robert's death, before the bills and the pressure and the constant worry, she'd been working toward her associate's degree in business administration. Those textbooks now gathered dust in the bedroom closet, symbols of a life that felt increasingly distant. "I'm heading out, Sarah Beth," Emma called, grabbing her purse and car keys from the small table by the door. Sarah Beth looked up from the guitar, her face serious. "Will you be home for lunch?" "No, sweetheart. I'm working a full shift today, but I'll be back by 6, and we can make spaghetti together. How does that sound?" The child's face lit up. "With the sauce from the jar?" Emma's heart clenched. Such a simple request, but even jarred pasta sauce had become a luxury they couldn't always afford. "Yes, with the sauce from the jar." As Emma stepped outside into the humid Tennessee morning, she was greeted by the familiar sights and sounds of the Paradise Valley Mobile Home Park. The name was optimistic at best. There were no valleys here, just a flat stretch of land dotted with aging trailers and the occasional attempt at a garden. But it was home, and it was what they could afford. Mrs. Rodriguez was already sitting on her front steps, a cup of coffee in her hands and a warm smile on her weathered face. Elena Rodriguez had been a godsend since they'd moved to the trailer park. A widow herself, she understood the challenges of raising children alone and had taken Sarah Beth under her wing without being asked. "Good morning, mija," Mrs. Rodriguez called out. "Sarah Beth can come over whenever she's ready. I'm making cookies today." "You're too good to us, Elena," Emma replied, meaning every word. The older woman's kindness was one of the few bright spots in their current situation. "Nonsense. That little girl is like sunshine. She makes my days brighter." Emma waved goodbye and walked toward her car, a 10-year-old Honda Civic that Robert had bought used just months before his accident. The paint was faded and the air conditioning worked sporadically, but it was reliable transportation, which was more than many of their neighbors had. As she drove through the quiet streets of Millfield, Emma let her mind wander to the conversation she'd overheard in the factory break room yesterday. Janet Morrison, who worked in the office, had been talking quietly with another employee about potential layoffs. The company had been losing contracts, and rumors suggested that they might need to reduce their workforce by 20% before the end of the year. Emma couldn't afford to lose her job. The paycheck barely covered their expenses as it was. The trailer lot rent, utilities, groceries, and Sarah Beth's school supplies left little room for anything else. She'd already had to make difficult choices, like canceling their health insurance to save money, gambling that they'd stay healthy until she could find something better. The Henderson Manufacturing plant came into view, a sprawling complex of beige buildings surrounded by chain-link fencing. The parking lot was already half full with the cars and trucks of her co-workers, people who, like her, were doing their best to make ends meet in an economy that seemed increasingly stacked against working families. Emma parked in her usual spot and sat for a moment in the car, gathering the strength she'd need to face another day. Through the windshield, she could see her supervisor, Dale Mitchell, smoking a cigarette by the employee entrance. Dale was a decent enough man, but Emma had noticed the stress lines around his eyes deepening lately, and she wondered how much he knew about the company's plans. As she walked toward the building, Emma's phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, her heart leapt with the irrational hope that it might be good news. Maybe a call back from one of the better-paying jobs she'd applied for, or perhaps her mother calling to say she could help with money for Sarah Beth's school clothes. Instead, it was an automated message from the electric company reminding her that her payment was past due and service would be disconnected if the bill wasn't paid within 48 hours. Emma closed her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to push down the panic that threatened to overwhelm her. She'd figure something out. She always did. For Sarah Beth's sake, she had to. Inside the factory, the morning shift was already in full swing. The familiar sounds of machinery and conversation provided a strange kind of comfort. At least here, surrounded by the routine of work, Emma could focus on something other than the mounting bills and impossible choices that waited for her at home. "Morning, Emma," called out Tracy Williams, a woman about Emma's age who worked at the station next to hers. Tracy had 3 kids and a husband who drove a delivery truck, and somehow she always managed to seem cheerful despite what Emma knew were her own financial struggles. "Morning, Tracy. How was your weekend?" "Oh, laundry, groceries, broke up about 6 fights between the kids, the usual excitement." Tracy grinned, and Emma found herself smiling back despite everything. This was what kept her going, the knowledge that she wasn't alone in her struggles, that other people were fighting the same battles and somehow finding reasons to smile. And of course, there was Sarah Beth, with her beautiful voice and unshakable belief that everything would work out in the end. As Emma began her work, settling into the rhythm of the assembly line, she allowed herself to think about her daughter's dreams. Sarah Beth talked constantly about becoming a country music star, about moving to Nashville and singing on the Grand Ole Opry stage. The dreams seemed impossibly far away from their current reality, but Emma had learned not to dismiss them entirely. After all, stranger things had happened, and Sarah Beth's talent was the one thing in their lives that felt genuinely magical. The morning passed in a blur of routine tasks and casual conversation with co-workers. Emma had become skilled at appearing engaged, while her mind wandered to more pressing concerns. How she could stretch their grocery budget for another week, whether she could convince the landlord to give them an extension on the rent, what she would do if the layoff rumors proved true. During her lunch break, Emma sat in the parking lot and called to check on Sarah Beth. Mrs. Rodriguez answered on the second ring, her voice warm and reassuring. "She's doing wonderful, mija. We made chocolate chip cookies this morning, and now she's teaching my grandson Miguel how to play guitar. You should hear them. It's like having a concert in my living room." Emma smiled, feeling some of the tension in her shoulders ease. "Thank you so much, Elena. I don't know what we'd do without you." "Family takes care of family," Mrs. Rodriguez replied simply. "And don't you worry about anything. That little girl of yours is destined for great things." After lunch, the afternoon shift began with an unexpected announcement. Dale Mitchell gathered all the employees in the main work area, his expression serious as he cleared his throat. "I want to address some of the rumors that have been going around," he began, and Emma felt her stomach drop. "As you may have heard, the company has been facing some challenges with orders and contracts. While we're working hard to secure new business, I want to be transparent with you about the situation." Emma exchanged glances with Tracy, who had gone pale beside her. "At this time, we're not planning any immediate layoffs," Dale continued, and Emma felt herself exhale. "However, we may need to reduce hours for some positions, and we're asking everyone to be flexible as we navigate this difficult period." Reduced hours meant less money, but it was better than no job at all. Emma tried to calculate how much less she might be earning, but the numbers were too depressing to contemplate fully. As the workday ended and Emma drove home through the fading afternoon light, she found herself thinking about Robert and the dreams they'd shared before everything changed. They talked about moving to a better neighborhood someday, maybe buying a small house with a yard where Sarah Beth could play. They'd discussed saving money for their daughter's education, for music lessons, for all the opportunities they wanted to give her. Those dreams felt like they belonged to someone else now, like memories from a movie she'd watched long ago. But as she pulled into the trailer park and saw Sarah Beth running toward her car with Miguel Rodriguez close behind, both children grinning and chattering about their afternoon adventures, Emma realized that some dreams had evolved rather than disappeared entirely. Her dream now was simpler but no less important: to keep her daughter safe, fed, and happy. To protect Sarah Beth's joy and innocence for as long as possible, to find a way to nurture the child's extraordinary talent without letting the harsh realities of their situation crush the hope that shone so brightly in those blue eyes. "Mama!" Sarah Beth called out, launching herself into Emma's arms as soon as she stepped out of the car. "You should hear the new song I learned. Mrs. Rodriguez taught me some Spanish words, and I figured out how to make them fit with the guitar chords." Emma hugged her daughter tight, breathing in that familiar scent of strawberry shampoo and childhood wonder. "I can't wait to hear it, baby girl. But first, let's go inside and figure out what we're having for dinner." As they walked toward the trailer together, Sarah Beth chattering about her day and Miguel waving goodbye from his grandmother's porch, Emma allowed herself a moment of gratitude. Their situation was far from ideal, but they had each other. They had people who cared about them, and they had Sarah Beth's music to remind them that beauty and hope could exist even in the most challenging circumstances. The first chapter of their story was one of struggle and uncertainty, but Emma had a feeling that the most important parts were still to be written. 3 weeks later, Emma's worst fears materialized in the form of a pink slip tucked into her pay envelope. She stared at the notice in the Henderson manufacturing parking lot, the words blurring as tears she couldn't afford to shed threatened to spill over. "Effective immediately, due to reduced production demands, your position has been eliminated." The standard corporate language felt like a slap in the face after 2 years of reliable service, of showing up every day regardless of how she felt, of working overtime whenever it was available. Emma crumpled the notice and shoved it into her purse, trying to compose herself before driving home to face Sarah Beth. The drive back to the trailer park felt endless, every familiar landmark along the way now tinged with uncertainty. How would she explain this to her daughter? How would she pay the rent next month? The electric bill was already overdue, and they were down to their last $20 in cash. Emma pulled into their spot and sat in the car for several minutes, watching through the window as Sarah Beth practiced guitar on Mrs. Rodriguez's front steps. The child's face was lit up with concentration and joy, completely absorbed in the music flowing from her small fingers. It was a scene that should have filled Emma with pride and happiness, but now it only amplified her sense of failure. "Think," Emma whispered to herself, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. "There has to be something you can do." She'd already applied to every business in Millfield that was hiring, but most of the positions paid minimum wage and offered no benefits. The local diner was looking for waitresses, but the owner had been clear that tips were unpredictable and the hours would be inconsistent. The grocery store had part-time openings, but part-time wouldn't come close to covering their expenses. Emma's phone buzzed with an incoming call from a number she didn't recognize. For a moment, hope fluttered in her chest. Maybe it was a callback from one of the jobs she'd applied for in the next town over. "Hello? Is this Emma Thompson?" The voice was professional, but not unkind. "Yes, this is Emma." "This is Rachel Stevens from Millfield Elementary. I'm calling about Sarah Beth's lunch account. I'm afraid there's an outstanding balance of $48, and district policy requires that we notify parents when accounts fall below." Emma closed her eyes, feeling the walls closing in around her. "I understand. I'll take care of it as soon as possible." "Of course. And Mrs. Thompson, Sarah Beth is such a wonderful student. If there are any circumstances that might qualify for our free lunch program, I'd be happy to send the paperwork home." The kindness in the woman's voice almost broke Emma's composure. "Thank you, that would be helpful." After ending the call, Emma sat in the car for another few minutes, trying to gather the strength to walk inside and pretend everything was fine. Sarah Beth had been through enough upheaval in her young life. She deserved to feel secure and protected, at least for a little while longer. "Mama," Sarah Beth's voice carried across the small yard as she spotted Emma's car. The child carefully set down the guitar and ran over, her face glowing with excitement. "I learned a whole new song. It's really hard, but Mrs. Rodriguez says I'm getting it perfect." Emma forced a smile as she got out of the car. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I can't wait to hear it." Sarah Beth grabbed her mother's hand, practically bouncing with enthusiasm. It's called "The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia," and it tells a whole story about a man and his sister and something bad that happened. Mrs. Rodriguez explained some of the words I didn't understand. Despite everything, Emma found herself genuinely smiling at her daughter's excitement. Sarah Beth had an incredible ability to find joy in music, to connect with songs on a level that seemed almost mystical for someone so young. Inside the trailer, Emma went through the motions of their evening routine, helping Sarah Beth with homework, preparing a simple dinner of grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, listening to her daughter practice guitar while she cleaned the small kitchen. But her mind was racing, calculating and recalculating their finances, trying to figure out how to make their remaining money stretch. After Sarah Beth went to bed, Emma sat at the small kitchen table with a notebook and calculator, writing down their monthly expenses and the pitiful amount they had left in their checking account. No matter how she arranged the numbers, they didn't add up to survival. The rent on the trailer lot was $450 a month. The electric bill was $120, water and sewer another $60. Their phone service was $40, car insurance $50. Groceries, gas, Sarah Beth's school supplies, clothing. It all added up to more money than Emma would have even when she was working. Emma put her head in her hands, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. She'd been strong for so long, had weathered so many storms since Robert's death, but this felt like the challenge that might finally break her. A soft knock at the door interrupted her despair. Emma quickly wiped her eyes and opened it to find Mrs. Rodriguez standing on the small front steps, holding a covered dish and wearing a concerned expression. "Mija, I hope you don't mind me stopping by so late. I made too much arroz con pollo, and I thought you and Sarah Beth might enjoy some." Emma's throat tightened with emotion. Elena Rodriguez had an uncanny ability to show up with food exactly when their own supplies were running low, always with the excuse that she'd cooked too much or was trying a new recipe. It was a kindness that preserved Emma's dignity while ensuring that Sarah Beth never went hungry. "Elena, you're too good to us," Emma said, accepting the warm dish. "I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me. But Mija, you look worried tonight. Is everything okay?" Emma hesitated, torn between her instinct to handle her problems alone and the desperate need to talk to someone who understood the challenges of making ends meet. "I lost my job today," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Rodriguez's expression immediately shifted to one of deep concern. Mija, I'm so sorry. What will you do?" "I don't know yet. I'm hoping to find something else quickly, but jobs are scarce around here, especially ones that pay enough to live on." Elena stepped inside without being invited, her maternal instincts taking over. "Sit down. Let me make you some tea, and we'll figure this out together." As Mrs. Rodriguez bustled around the small kitchen, Emma found herself relaxing slightly for the first time all day. There was something comforting about having another adult take charge, even temporarily. "You know," Elena said, settling into the chair across from Emma with 2 steaming mugs, "my nephew Carlos owns a restaurant in Nashville. It's about an hour drive from here, but they're always looking for good servers, and the tips are much better than anything you'll find in Millfield." Emma's eyes widened with interest. "Nashville? That would be a long commute." "See, but Carlos is good people. He takes care of his employees, gives them steady schedules, and the restaurant does well because it's near the music district. Lots of tourists and music industry people. The mention of Nashville's music district sparked something in Emma's mind. She'd always dismissed Sarah Beth's dreams of becoming a country music star as childhood fantasy, but what if being closer to the heart of the industry could somehow benefit her daughter's future? Would you be willing to call him? Emma asked, feeling a flutter of hope for the first time in hours. Of course, Mika. I'll call him tomorrow morning. Carlos owes me a few favors. I helped his wife when their first baby was born, and I've been sending them my salsa recipe for years. That night, Emma lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of the trailer park. Distant televisions, the occasional car passing by, the gentle hum of air conditioning units working overtime against the humid Tennessee heat. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to imagine a different future. Nashville represented opportunity, not just for employment, but for Sarah Beth's musical dreams. Even if Emma ended up working in a restaurant, at least they'd be in a city where music mattered, where talent was recognized and nurtured. Maybe Sarah Beth could take real voice lessons, or perform at local venues, or simply be surrounded by the energy and possibility that came with Music City. The next morning brought both hope and harsh reality. Mrs. Rodriguez called just after 8 to report that her nephew was definitely interested in meeting Emma, and could she come in for an interview that afternoon? But an hour later, another call delivered devastating news. The trailer park manager, a stern man named Bob Fletcher, informed Emma that their rent was now 10 days overdue, and if payment wasn't received by the end of the week, they would face eviction. Emma stared at the phone after Fletcher hung up, her mind reeling. Even if she got the job in Nashville, she wouldn't receive her first paycheck for at least 2 weeks. They needed money immediately, and she had no idea where to find it. Sarah Beth emerged from her bedroom, rubbing sleep from her eyes and carrying her beloved guitar. "Morning, Mama. Can we have pancakes for breakfast?" Emma's heart broke a little more. They had enough pancake mix for one more meal, and after that, their food options would be severely limited until she could figure out their financial situation. "Of course, sweetheart. Why don't you play something pretty while I cook?" As Sarah Beth settled into her favorite spot on the living room floor and began strumming a gentle melody, Emma tried to focus on making breakfast while her mind raced through possible solutions. She could try to sell some of their belongings, but they owned very little of value. She could ask her mother for help, but Emma's relationship with her parents had been strained since Robert's death, complicated by their disapproval of her marriage and their belief that she should move back home and let them raise Sarah Beth. The sound of her daughter's voice, pure and sweet as she sang along with her guitar playing, provided a moment of peace in the chaos of Emma's thoughts. Sarah Beth was singing "Angel from Montgomery," the John Prine song that had been covered by numerous country artists over the years. The lyrics about dreaming of escape and longing for something better seemed to perfectly capture their current situation. "That was beautiful, baby girl," Emma said, setting a plate of pancakes in front of her daughter. Sarah Beth beamed with pride. "Mrs. Rodriguez taught it to me yesterday. She said it's about hoping for better things, even when life is hard." The simple wisdom in her daughter's words hit Emma like a revelation. Yes, their situation was desperate, but they weren't defeated yet. She had an interview that afternoon, she had people who cared about them, and she had the most important thing of all, Sarah Beth's unwavering optimism and incredible talent. After breakfast, Emma spent the morning preparing for her interview, choosing her best outfit and researching Carlos Rodriguez's restaurant online. Casa Rodriguez appeared to be a successful, family-owned establishment, with excellent reviews and a reputation for authentic Mexican cuisine and live music. The website featured photos of a warm, welcoming dining room and mentioned their regular acoustic music nights. As Emma got ready to leave for Nashville, Sarah Beth clung to her with uncharacteristic anxiety. "Mama, are we going to be okay?" the child asked, her blue eyes searching Emma's face for reassurance. Emma knelt down to meet her daughter at eye level, taking Sarah Beth's small hands in her own. "We're going to be fine, sweetheart. Sometimes life throws us challenges, but we're strong and we have people who love us. Everything is going to work out." Sarah Beth nodded solemnly, then suddenly brightened. "Maybe when we have more money, I can get a better guitar. This one is good, but some of the strings sound funny." Emma's heart clenched at the reminder of all the things she couldn't provide for her talented daughter. "Maybe so, baby girl. Maybe so." The drive to Nashville took her through rolling hills and farmland, past small towns that looked much like Millfield, all struggling to maintain their identity in a changing economy. But as Emma approached the city and saw the famous Nashville skyline in the distance, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months: genuine hope. Casa Rodriguez was located in a busy section of town, not far from the famous honky-tonk bars and music venues that made Nashville famous. The restaurant was larger than Emma had expected, with warm lighting, colorful decorations, and the sound of laughter and conversation filling the air even in the middle of the afternoon. Carlos Rodriguez turned out to be a man in his 40s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. His interview style was more like a friendly conversation, focusing on Emma's experience and availability rather than putting her through the typical stress of formal questioning. "Elena speaks very highly of you," Carlos said, leading Emma to a quiet corner booth. "She tells me you're a hard worker with a young daughter." "That's right. Sarah Beth is 8, and she's everything to me. I need a job that will allow me to provide for her properly." Carlos nodded with understanding. "I have children too. Family comes first, always. The position I have available is dinner shift, Tuesday through Saturday. The hours are 4 to midnight, which I know is late, but the tips are much better in the evening, and you'd have Sundays and Mondays off to spend with your daughter." Emma's mind raced through the logistics. The late hours would be challenging, but Mrs. Rodriguez had already offered to watch Sarah Beth in the evenings. And having 2 full days off each week would be more time with her daughter than she'd had while working at the factory. "The base pay is $3 an hour plus tips," Carlos continued. "Most of our experienced servers average between $15 and $20 an hour total, sometimes more on busy weekends. We also provide health insurance after 90 days and 1 meal per shift." It sounded almost too good to be true. Emma tried to maintain her composure, but Carlos seemed to sense her relief and desperation. "When could you start?" she asked, hoping she didn't sound too eager. "How about next Tuesday? That gives you time to arrange childcare and adjust to the commute. Elena mentioned you live in Millfield. That's quite a drive, but several of our employees come from smaller towns. Some of them carpool to save on gas." As Emma drove home from the interview, her mind buzzing with plans and possibilities, she allowed herself to feel cautiously optimistic for the first time in weeks. The job wouldn't solve all their problems immediately, but it was a start. And being in Nashville, surrounded by the energy and opportunity of Music City, felt like a step towards something better for both her and Sarah Beth. She arrived home to find Sarah Beth and Mrs. Rodriguez in the small yard behind the trailer, the child sitting on an overturned bucket, while Elena taught her a new guitar technique. "Mama!" Sarah Beth called out, jumping up to run to Emma. "Mrs. Rodriguez showed me how to make the guitar sound like it's crying. Listen." As her daughter demonstrated the new technique, producing a haunting, beautiful sound from the old guitar, Emma realized that this might be exactly what they needed. Nashville wasn't just a place to find work, it was a place where Sarah Beth's extraordinary talent might actually have a chance to flourish. The second chapter of their story was ending with uncertainty, but it was also beginning to hint at the possibilities that lay ahead. Emma didn't know it yet, but their move toward Nashville would put them on a path that would change their lives in ways she could never have imagined. Emma's first week at Casa Rodriguez was a whirlwind of learning new routines, memorizing menu items, and adjusting to the unique rhythm of Nashville's restaurant scene. The work was demanding, far more challenging than her factory job had been. But for the first time in months, Emma felt energized rather than defeated by her daily responsibilities. The restaurant's clientele was as diverse as Nashville itself. Tourists clutching guidebooks and cameras, local business people grabbing quick dinners, musicians stopping by after late-night recording sessions, and industry professionals discussing deals over margaritas and enchiladas. Emma found herself fascinated by the conversations she overheard, the casual mention of record labels and recording studios and music venues that she'd only read about online. "You're catching on quick," said Maria Santos, an experienced server who had taken Emma under her wing during training. "Carlos has a good eye for people. He knew you'd work out." Emma smiled as she wiped down tables during a brief lull in the dinner rush. "It's definitely different from what I was doing before. More alive, I guess." Maria laughed, a warm sound that had become familiar over the past few days. "That's Nashville for you. Even when you're just serving food, you're part of the music scene. You never know who might walk through that door." As if summoned by their conversation, the restaurant's front door chimed, and Emma looked up to see a man in his 30s enter, wearing a well-worn cowboy hat and carrying a guitar case. He had the slightly rumpled appearance of someone who'd been in a recording studio for hours, but his eyes were bright with the kind of energy that came from doing work you loved. "Hey, Jake," Maria called out with a wave. "Your usual table?" Jake Morrison nodded, settling into a corner booth that gave him a view of the restaurant's small stage area. Emma had learned that Casa Rodriguez featured live acoustic music on weekends, providing a platform for both established and up-and-coming Nashville artists. "New server?" Jake asked, nodding toward Emma with friendly curiosity. "That's Emma," Maria replied. "Emma, this is Jake Morrison. He's one of our regulars, and he writes songs for some pretty famous people." Emma approached the table with Jake's order, coffee, black, and the chicken quesadilla that Maria had said he ordered every time he came in. As she set down his coffee, Jake looked at her with the kind of attention that suggested he was genuinely interested in her story. "You're not from Nashville originally," he observed. It wasn't a question. "Small town about an hour away," Emma confirmed. "Millfield." "What brought you here?" "Most people come to Nashville for the music." Emma hesitated. She'd become accustomed to keeping her personal life private, but there was something about Jake's manner that invited confidence. "Work, mainly. But my daughter, she's got a real gift for music. I thought being closer to Nashville might give her more opportunities." Jake's expression immediately shifted to one of interest. "How old is she?" 8. She plays guitar and sings, mostly country. She taught herself everything by listening to CDs and the radio." "Taught herself?" Jake leaned forward slightly. "That's impressive. Natural talent is rare, especially in kids that young." Before Emma could respond, her attention was diverted by a commotion near the restaurant's entrance. A group of women had entered, talking and laughing loudly, but it was their conversation that made Emma's heart race. "I can't believe she's actually in town," one of them was saying. "I mean, I heard Reba McEntire was recording something at Soundstage Studios, but I didn't think we'd actually get to see her around town." Emma's coffee pot nearly slipped from her hands. Reba McEntire, Sarah Beth's absolute idol, was in Nashville. The child would be beside herself with excitement if she knew. Jake noticed Emma's reaction and smiled knowingly. "Big Reba fan. My daughter is obsessed with her," Emma admitted, trying to regain her composure. "She knows every song, practices them constantly. Sometimes I think she believes she's going to meet Reba someday." "You never know in this town," Jake said with a grin. "Stranger things have happened. Nashville's smaller than people think, especially when you're talking about the music community." Emma spent the rest of her shift in a daze, Jake's words echoing in her mind. When she finally made the drive home to Millfield, it was nearly 1 in the morning, but she found herself energized rather than exhausted. The late-night drive through the quiet Tennessee countryside gave her time to think, to process the changes that were slowly transforming their lives. Mrs. Rodriguez was dozing in Emma's living room when she arrived, Sarah Beth long since asleep in her bed. Elena woke as Emma entered, immediately alert despite the late hour. "How was work, mija?" she asked quietly, gathering her purse and cardigan. "Good. Really good, actually. Elena, I can't thank you enough for watching Sarah Beth. I know these hours are difficult." Elena waved away Emma's gratitude with a gentle smile. "That little girl is no trouble at all. She practiced guitar for 2 hours, did her homework, and told me all about the new song she's learning. She's getting so good, Emma, really remarkable for someone so young." After Mrs. Rodriguez left, Emma checked on Sarah Beth, finding her daughter sleeping peacefully with her guitar resting against the wall nearby. Even in sleep, Sarah Beth looked content, her small hands positioned as if she were still playing chords in her dreams. Emma's new routine quickly established itself over the following weeks. During the day, she spent time with Sarah Beth, helping with homework, listening to her practice, and enjoying the kind of quality mother-daughter time that had been impossible when she was working factory shifts. In the afternoon, she made the drive to Nashville, immersing herself in the world of Casa Rodriguez and the broader Nashville music scene. The tips were better than Carlos had promised. On good nights, Emma was earning more than she'd made in an entire day at the factory. For the first time since Robert's death, she began to feel like they might actually be able to get ahead rather than just survive. Sarah Beth seemed to sense the change in their circumstances, even though Emma had been careful not to discuss their financial struggles in detail. The child was happier, more animated, and her musical development was accelerating at an almost alarming pace. "Mama, listen to this," Sarah Beth said one afternoon, settling into her usual practice spot with the guitar across her lap. "I figured out how to play fancy exactly like Reba does it." Emma settled onto the couch to listen, and what she heard took her breath away. Sarah Beth's rendition wasn't just technically proficient, it was emotionally sophisticated, capturing nuances in the song that spoke to experiences far beyond an 8-year-old's understanding. "Baby girl, that was incredible," Emma said, meaning every word. "How did you learn to play it like that?" Sarah Beth shrugged with the casual confidence of childhood. "I just listened to it over and over until I could hear all the parts. The guitar tells a story just like the words do." Emma stared at her daughter, struck by the depth of musical understanding in someone so young. Maybe Jake Morrison had been right. Natural talent like this was rare, and they were in the right place to nurture it. That evening at Casa Rodriguez, Emma found herself paying closer attention to the musicians who frequented the restaurant. She began to understand the informal network that connected Nashville's music community, the way information and opportunities flowed through casual conversations and chance encounters. "You seem different lately," Maria observed during a quiet moment between tables. "More focused, I guess." Emma smiled, surprised by her co-worker's perception. "I think I'm starting to understand why people come here. It's not just about the jobs or the industry. There's something in the air, like anything could happen." "That's the Nashville magic," Maria agreed. "It gets in your blood. Even those of us who aren't musicians feel it." As if to prove her point, the restaurant's door chimed, and Emma looked up to see Jake Morrison entering for his usual late dinner. But tonight, he wasn't alone. A woman in her 50s accompanied him, dressed simply but with the kind of understated confidence that suggested she was someone important in the music world. Emma approached their table with menus, trying not to stare at Jake's companion. The woman had silver-streaked auburn hair and kind eyes, and something about her seemed familiar, though Emma couldn't place where she might have seen her before. "Evening, Jake," Emma said, setting down water glasses. "Your usual?" "Actually, I think we'll need a few minutes to look at the menu," Jake replied. Then, with a slight smile, he added, "Emma, I'd like you to meet my friend Susan. She's a voice coach here in town, works with some pretty talented people." Susan extended her hand with a warm smile. "Jake's told me about your daughter. He says she's got quite a gift." Emma felt her cheeks flush. "He's very kind. Sarah Beth loves music, especially country." "Self-taught?" Jake mentioned. Susan's expression was professionally interested. "That's unusual. Most kids that age need quite a bit of guidance to develop proper technique." "She just seems to understand it naturally," Emma said, feeling slightly overwhelmed by the attention. "I've never been able to afford lessons for her." Susan and Jake exchanged a look that Emma couldn't quite interpret. "Would you be interested in having someone listen to her sing?" Susan asked carefully. "I don't make promises, but if she's as talented as Jake seems to think, there might be ways to help her develop her abilities." Emma's heart began to race. This was the kind of opportunity she'd dreamed about but never quite believed could happen. Yes, of course, she'd be thrilled. "Why don't you bring her by the restaurant this weekend?" Jake suggested. Saturday afternoons are usually quiet, and Susan could listen to her sing a few songs. As Emma took their order and moved away from the table, her mind was spinning with possibilities. This could be the break Sarah Beth needed, the chance to have her talent recognized by people who understood the music business. The rest of the week passed in a blur of anticipation. Emma told Sarah Beth about the invitation, watching her daughter's face light up with the kind of pure joy that made all their struggles worthwhile. "Real music people want to hear me sing?" Sarah Beth asked, bouncing on her toes with excitement. "In Nashville?" "Real music people," Emma confirmed. "So we need to practice extra hard this week, okay?" Sarah Beth threw herself into preparation with the single-minded focus that had always characterized her approach to music. She practiced for hours each day, refining her technique and working on the emotional delivery of her favorite songs. By Saturday afternoon, both Emma and Sarah Beth were nervous with anticipation. Emma had chosen Sarah Beth's best outfit, a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes, and had braided her daughter's long blonde hair into a neat plait. Casa Rodriguez was indeed quiet when they arrived, with only a handful of early diners scattered throughout the restaurant. Jake and Susan were waiting at a corner table, both wearing encouraging smiles as Emma and Sarah Beth approached. "You must be Sarah Beth," Susan said, standing to shake the child's hand with the same respect she might show an adult. "I'm Susan Walker. I've heard wonderful things about your singing." Sarah Beth, who had been chattering nervously during the car ride, suddenly became shy in the presence of actual music industry professionals. She stayed close to Emma's side, clutching her guitar case with white knuckles. "It's okay, sweetheart," Emma murmured. "Just pretend you're at home, practicing for me and Mrs. Rodriguez." Jake gestured toward the restaurant's small stage area. "Would you like to sit up there? It might feel more comfortable." Sarah Beth nodded, her natural performer's instincts beginning to overcome her nerves. She carefully unpacked her guitar, the worn instrument looking almost comically large in her small hands. "What would you like to sing for us?" Susan asked gently. Sarah Beth looked at her mother for reassurance, then seemed to gather her courage. "I know lots of Reba McEntire songs. Would you like to hear Fancy?" Susan's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's quite an ambitious choice. It's a challenging song, even for experienced singers." "I've been practicing it a lot," Sarah Beth said simply. As her daughter began to play the opening chords, Emma held her breath. This was it, the moment that could change everything, or the moment that could crush Sarah Beth's dreams before they'd really had a chance to develop. But as Sarah Beth began to sing, Emma's concerns evaporated. The child's voice filled the restaurant with a power and emotion that seemed impossible from someone so young. She wasn't just singing the words, she was telling the story, capturing the desperation and determination of the character in the song with an understanding that went far beyond her years. When the last note faded away, the restaurant was completely silent. Even the kitchen staff had stopped their work to listen. Susan Walker was staring at Sarah Beth with an expression of genuine amazement. "My God," Susan whispered. "Jake, you didn't tell me she was this good." Jake was grinning from ear to ear. "I had a feeling, but hearing her in person, that's something special." Sarah Beth looked between the adults uncertainly. "Did I do okay?" Susan stood up and walked over to the stage, her expression serious but kind. "Sarah Beth, how long have you been singing?" "Since I was little," Sarah Beth replied. "My daddy taught me some chords before he went to heaven, and then I just kept learning new songs." "And you've never had formal lessons?" "No voice coach or guitar teacher." Sarah Beth shook her head. "Mama says lessons cost a lot of money." Susan turned to look at Emma, her expression thoughtful. "Mrs. Thompson, your daughter has extraordinary natural talent. With proper training and guidance, she could have a real future in music." Emma felt tears prick at her eyes. "What would that involve?" "I'd like to work with her if you're willing. Pro bono, at least initially. She needs technique training, help with breath control, and some guidance on stage presence. But the raw talent is there, more than I've seen in years of teaching." This was it, the moment Emma had been hoping for without quite believing it could happen. Professional recognition of Sarah Beth's gift and an offer to help develop it properly. "There's something else," Jake added, his expression becoming more serious. "I've been thinking about what you said about your daughter being a Reba McEntire fan." Emma nodded, wondering where this was leading. "I happen to know that Reba's in town this week working on a project. She's a friend of mine. I think she'd be interested in hearing about Sarah Beth." Emma's world seemed to tilt slightly. "You know Reba McEntire?" Jake smiled at her reaction. "Nashville's a small town in a lot of ways. I've written songs for her, and she's always been interested in young talent. Would you be okay if I mentioned Sarah Beth to her?" Emma looked at her daughter, who had gone completely still at the mention of her idol's name. "Reba McEntire might want to hear about me," Sarah Beth whispered. "No promises," Jake said quickly. "But yes, it's possible." As they drove home that afternoon, Sarah Beth chattering excitedly about voice lessons and the possibility of meeting her hero, Emma realized that their story was taking a turn she never could have anticipated. They'd come to Nashville looking for work and stability, but they might have found something much more precious: the chance for Sarah Beth's dreams to become reality. The third chapter of their journey was ending with hope and possibility, setting the stage for encounters that would transform their lives in ways Emma was only beginning to imagine. 2 weeks later, Emma was beginning to believe that their lives had finally stabilized. Sarah Beth was thriving with Susan Walker's voice coaching, showing remarkable improvement in technique while maintaining the natural emotional connection that made her singing so special. Emma's income from Casa Rodriguez was allowing them to catch up on bills and even save a small amount each week. For the first time since Robert's death, Emma dared to feel optimistic about their future. That optimism was tested on a Tuesday morning when Emma received a call that made her blood run cold. "Mrs. Thompson, this is Dr. Martinez from Millfield Elementary. Sarah Beth has been in an accident." Emma's hands began to shake as she gripped the phone. "What kind of accident? Is she hurt?" She fell from the playground equipment during recess. She's conscious and alert, but she's complaining of pain in her wrist. We've called an ambulance to take her to Millfield General for x-rays. The drive to the hospital felt endless, Emma's mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Sarah Beth's hands were everything to her guitar playing, her future, her dreams. If she'd seriously injured her wrist, Emma found her daughter in the emergency room, looking small and scared on the hospital bed. Sarah Beth's left wrist was swollen and obviously painful, but her blue eyes lit up with relief when she saw her mother. "Mama, it hurts," Sarah Beth said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I was trying to reach the monkey bars and I fell weird." Emma gathered her daughter carefully, mindful of the injured wrist. "It's going to be okay, baby girl. The doctors will fix you up." The x-rays revealed a fracture in Sarah Beth's left wrist, not severe, but significant enough to require a cast for 6 weeks. As the doctor explained the injury and treatment plan, Emma found herself focused on one crucial question. "Will she be able to play guitar again normally?" Emma asked. Dr. Peterson, a kind woman in her 40s, smiled reassuringly. With proper healing and maybe some physical therapy, she should have full function restored. Children heal remarkably well from this type of injury. As they left the hospital with Sarah Beth's arm in a bright purple cast, Emma tried to stay positive for her daughter's sake. 6 weeks wasn't forever, and the doctor had been optimistic about full recovery. But Sarah Beth was devastated. "How can I practice for my lessons with Susan? What if I forget how to play? What if my fingers don't work right when the cast comes off?" Emma's heart broke at the fear in her daughter's voice. "We'll figure it out, sweetheart. Maybe Susan can work on other things with you. Breathing exercises, singing without the guitar. This is just temporary." That evening, Emma called Susan Walker to explain the situation. The voice coach was sympathetic and immediately began suggesting alternatives. "This might actually be a blessing in disguise," Susan said thoughtfully. "Sarah Beth relies heavily on her guitar playing, which is wonderful, but she could benefit from developing her vocal skills independently. We can work on breath control, vocal exercises, and stage presence while her wrist heals." Emma felt some of her anxiety ease. "You really think this won't set her back?" "Not at all. Some of the best vocalists learn to separate their singing from their instrument playing. This could actually make her more versatile in the long run." The next few days settled into a new routine. Sarah Beth was frustrated by her inability to play guitar, but she threw herself into her vocal exercises with Susan with the same determination she'd always shown. Emma watched her daughter adapt to the challenge with a resilience that made her proud. On Friday afternoon, Emma was preparing for her shift at Casa Rodriguez when her phone rang. The caller ID showed Jake Morrison's number. "Emma, I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." Jake's voice was filled with excitement. "I have some news that I think you and Sarah Beth will want to hear." Emma's pulse quickened. "What kind of news?" "I told Reba about Sarah Beth, just like I promised. She's interested in meeting her." Emma sank onto the couch, feeling lightheaded. She wants to meet Sarah Beth. More than that, she's going to be in Millfield this weekend. She's visiting an old friend who lives there. She asked if there was any chance she could hear Sarah Beth sing. Emma's mind raced. "Jake, Sarah Beth broke her wrist earlier this week. She can't play guitar right now." "That's okay. Reba's more interested in her voice anyway. Would Sunday afternoon work?" Reba suggested somewhere casual, maybe that grocery store you mentioned, Miller's Market. She said she could arrange to be there around 2 o'clock. Emma felt surreal, like she was having a dream conversation. "Reba McEntire wants to meet my daughter at the grocery store?" Jake laughed. "I know it sounds strange, but Reba likes to keep things low-key when she's not working. She thinks a natural setting would be less intimidating for Sarah Beth." After hanging up, Emma sat in stunned silence for several minutes before calling Sarah Beth into the room. Her daughter appeared with her guitar balanced awkwardly against her uninjured arm, her face determined despite the obvious difficulty of trying to play one-handed. "Baby girl, I need to tell you something, and I want you to sit down first." Sarah Beth's expression immediately turned worried. "Are we in trouble? Did something bad happen?" "No, sweetheart. Something amazing happened." Emma took a deep breath. "Reba McEntire wants to meet you." Sarah Beth's eyes widened to the size of saucers. "Reba? Real Reba? Reba McEntire wants to meet me?" "This Sunday at Miller's Market. Jake Morrison arranged it." Sarah Beth stared at her mother for a long moment, then carefully set down her guitar and threw her good arm around Emma's neck. "Mama, are you serious? This isn't a joke?" "It's not a joke, baby. But Sarah Beth, I need you to understand that this is just a meeting. Don't get your hopes up too high about what might happen." But even as Emma said the words, she could see that Sarah Beth was already lost in dreams of possibility. The child spent the rest of the evening planning what she would wear, what song she might sing, and what she would say to her idol. Emma called Mrs. Rodriguez to share the news, and within an hour, it seemed like half the trailer park knew about Sarah Beth's upcoming encounter. Elena arrived with a casserole and a huge smile, followed by several neighbors who wanted to offer encouragement and advice. "Mija, this is incredible," Mrs. Rodriguez said, settling into Emma's small kitchen. "But are you sure this is real? How do you know this Jake person isn't playing some kind of trick?" Emma had wondered the same thing herself. "I've gotten to know him over the past few weeks. He's a legitimate songwriter, and I've seen him with other music industry people. I think it's real." Saturday passed in a blur of preparation and nervous energy. Emma chose Sarah Beth's outfit carefully, a simple yellow dress that complemented her daughter's coloring without looking too formal. They practiced vocal warm-ups that Susan had taught them, and Emma tried to prepare Sarah Beth for the possibility that the meeting might not lead to anything concrete. "Remember, sweetheart, Reba is just going to listen to you sing. She might not be able to help you with your career, but meeting her will be amazing no matter what happens." Sarah Beth nodded solemnly, but Emma could see the dreams dancing in her daughter's eyes. Sunday morning, Emma woke with butterflies in her stomach that rivaled anything she'd felt on her first day at Casa Rodriguez. She and Sarah Beth spent extra time getting ready, both of them nervous about making a good impression. At 1:30, they drove to Miller's Market, the same grocery store where Emma had shopped with their last $20 just weeks before. The parking lot was busier than usual for a Sunday afternoon, but Emma found a spot near the entrance and took several deep breaths to calm her nerves. "Are you ready, baby girl?" Emma asked, looking at her daughter in the rearview mirror. Sarah Beth nodded, her cast-covered arm cradled carefully in her lap. "Mama, what if she doesn't like my singing? What if I'm not as good as I think I am?" Emma turned to face her daughter fully. "Sarah Beth Thompson, you have a gift that people notice everywhere you go. Susan Walker, who's worked with famous singers, thinks you're extraordinary. Jake Morrison, who writes songs for Nashville stars, wanted Reba to hear you. You're exactly as good as you think you are, maybe better." They walked into Miller's Market together, Emma's hand protectively on Sarah Beth's shoulder. The store was busy with Sunday shoppers, but Emma quickly spotted Jake Morrison near the produce section, talking quietly with a woman wearing jeans, a simple blouse and a baseball cap pulled low over her face. Emma's heart nearly stopped. Even with the casual clothes and the attempt at anonymity, there was no mistaking the woman's identity. Reba McEntire, country music legend and Sarah Beth's absolute idol, was standing 20 feet away from them. Jake caught sight of Emma and Sarah Beth and waved them over with an encouraging smile. As they approached, Reba turned to look at them, and Emma was struck by the genuine warmth in her eyes. "You must be Sarah Beth," Reba said, pulling off her baseball cap to reveal her famous red hair. I'm Reba. Jake's told me wonderful things about you. Sarah Beth had gone completely speechless, staring at her idol with the kind of awe reserved for meeting genuine heroes. Emma gently nudged her daughter forward. "Can you say hello to Miss McEntire, sweetheart?" Emma prompted gently. "You're really her," Sarah Beth whispered. "You're really Reba." Reba laughed, a sound that was exactly as warm and genuine as it was on her records. "I'm really me. And Jake tells me you're really talented. He says you know some of my songs." Sarah Beth nodded vigorously, finally finding her voice. "I know all of them. Well, almost all of them. Fancy is my favorite, but I also love The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia and Does He Love You and—" "Whoa there, honey," Reba said with a grin. "Sounds like you're a true fan. Jake mentioned you might sing something for me." Emma looked around the busy grocery store, suddenly realizing the awkwardness of the situation. "Here? Why not?" Reba said with a shrug. "Some of the best music happens in the most unexpected places." Sarah Beth looked at her mother uncertainly. "But I can't play guitar with my cast." "That's all right, sweetheart," Reba said gently. "Sometimes the voice is all you need." The moment hung in the air, pregnant with possibility. Emma could see other shoppers beginning to notice their small group. Whispers starting to spread as people recognized the famous singer. Sarah Beth took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment as if gathering courage, then opened them and began to sing. "I remember it all very well looking back. It was the summer I turned 18. Her voice, clear and pure, began to fill the grocery store aisle. Shoppers stopped what they were doing, drawn by the unexpected beauty of the sound. Sarah Beth sang Fancy with the same emotional depth and technical skill she'd shown at Casa Rodriguez. But there was something more now, a confidence and power that came from singing for her idol. As the song continued, Emma watched Reba's expression change from polite interest to genuine amazement. The country star's eyes widened, and she unconsciously moved closer to Sarah Beth, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. When Sarah Beth reached the final chorus, her voice soaring with emotion and power, the entire section of the store had gone quiet. Even the background music seemed to have stopped. As the last note faded away, Miller's Market erupted in spontaneous applause. Shoppers who had gathered around their impromptu performance clapped and cheered, many of them pulling out their phones to capture the moment. But Emma only had eyes for Reba McEntire, who was staring at Sarah Beth with an expression of complete astonishment. "My lord," Reba whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Child, where did you learn to sing like that?" Sarah Beth, still glowing from the performance, looked up at her idol with shining eyes. "From you. I learned by listening to your songs." And in that moment, in the produce aisle of a small-town grocery store, Emma knew that their lives had just changed forever. Reba McEntire stood in the grocery store aisle, tears glistening in her eyes as she looked down at 8-year-old Sarah Beth Thompson. The impromptu performance had drawn a crowd of at least 30 people, all of them still buzzing with excitement and amazement at what they'd just witnessed. "Honey, I've been in this business for over 40 years, Reba said, her voice soft but carrying clearly through the gathered crowd. "I've heard thousands of singers, worked with some of the most talented people in country music. But what you just did, that was something truly special." Sarah Beth beamed up at her idol, her cast-covered arm forgotten in the excitement of the moment. "Really? You really think so?" "I know so," Reba replied firmly. Then she turned to Emma, her expression becoming more serious. "Ma'am, we need to talk. Your daughter has a gift that comes along maybe once in a generation." Emma felt overwhelmed by the sudden attention and the implications of what was happening. We're just so honored that you took the time to listen to her." "The honor is mine," Reba said sincerely. Then, noticing the growing crowd and the increasing number of phone cameras pointed in their direction, she made a quick decision. "Listen, this is getting a bit chaotic. Is there somewhere more private we could go? I'd like to spend some real time with you both." Jake Morrison, who had been watching the entire scene with a huge grin, stepped forward. "There's a small cafe just down the street, Miller's Diner. They might let us use their back room." Emma found herself nodding, still feeling like she was in a dream. "Sarah Beth, would you like to go have coffee with Miss McEntire?" "Can we really?" Sarah Beth asked, her eyes wide with disbelief. 20 minutes later, they were seated in the back room of Miller's Diner, away from the curious eyes of other customers. Reba had removed her baseball cap entirely, and Emma was struck by how normal and approachable the country music superstar seemed in person. "First things first," Reba said, leaning across the table toward Sarah Beth. "Tell me about yourself, honey. How long have you been singing?" Sarah Beth launched into her story with the unself-conscious enthusiasm of childhood, telling Reba about learning guitar from her father, about practicing with Mrs. Rodriguez, about her dreams of someday performing on the Grand Ole Opry stage. Emma watched Reba's face as her daughter spoke, seeing genuine interest and warmth in the singer's expression. "And your mama tells me you taught yourself everything?" Reba asked. "Mostly," Sarah Beth confirmed. "Though I've been taking voice lessons with Miss Susan in Nashville. She's teaching me about breathing and stuff." Reba's eyebrows rose. "Susan Walker?" Emma nodded. "Jake introduced us to her. She's been working with Sarah Beth pro bono." "Susan's one of the best voice coaches in Nashville," Reba said with approval. "If she's working with you, that tells me she sees the same potential I do." Reba turned to Emma, her expression becoming more serious. "I want to be straight with you about something. What I heard in that grocery store, that wasn't just a talented kid singing, that was artistry. Sarah Beth has natural phrasing, emotional connection, and technical ability that most professional singers spend years trying to develop." Emma felt a flush of pride mixed with uncertainty. "What does that mean for her future?" "Well, that depends on what you want for her," Reba replied carefully. "The music business can be wonderful, but it can also be challenging, especially for someone so young. But if Sarah Beth wants to pursue this, and I mean really wants it, there are people who would be interested in helping her develop her talent properly." Sarah Beth had been listening intently to the adult conversation. "I do want it," she said quietly but firmly. "More than anything. I dream about singing for people, about making them feel happy or sad or whatever the song is supposed to make them feel." Reba smiled at the child's earnest response. "That's exactly what music is supposed to do, honey, and you have a gift for making people feel those emotions." She paused, seeming to consider her words carefully. "Emma, if you're open to it, I'd like to make some introductions. There are people in Nashville, good people who care about artists and not just money, who should hear Sarah Beth sing." Emma's heart raced. What kind of people? Managers, producers, people who could help guide her career properly. "But I want to be clear. Any decisions would be entirely up to you and Sarah Beth. I'm not talking about rushing into anything or exploiting her talent. I'm talking about making sure she has the right support system if she chooses to pursue music professionally." Jake Morrison, who had been quietly observing the conversation, leaned forward. "Reba, what about the Children's Music Festival next month? That might be a good low-pressure way for Sarah Beth to get some exposure." Reba's face lit up. "That's a brilliant idea. The Children's Music Festival in Nashville. It's specifically designed to showcase young talent in a family-friendly environment. Sarah Beth, how would you feel about performing on a real stage in front of a real audience?" Sarah Beth's eyes went wide. "A real stage? With lights and everything?" "Lights, sound system, the works," Reba confirmed. "It's not as big as the Grand Ole Opry, but it's a real venue where real artists perform. Emma felt excitement and terror in equal measure. How many people would be there? Usually around 500, Jake said. Families, music industry people, talent scouts. It's become an important showcase for young artists. And I'd be willing to introduce her, Reba added. That alone would guarantee that the right people pay attention. Emma looked at her daughter, who was practically vibrating with excitement. What do you think, baby girl? Do you feel ready for something like that? Mama, this is what I've been dreaming about my whole life, Sarah Beth said solemnly. I know I'm ready. Reba reached across the table and gently took Sarah Beth's uninjured hand. Honey, I want you to understand something. This business can be tough, even for adults. There will be people who tell you you're not good enough, who try to change who you are, who might not have your best interests at heart. If you decide to do this, you need to promise me that you'll always remember why you started singing in the first place. Because it makes me happy, Sarah Beth said without hesitation, and because it makes other people happy too. That's exactly right, Reba said with a warm smile. And as long as you remember that, you'll be just fine. They spent another hour in the diner, talking about music, dreams, and the practical realities of pursuing a career in country music. Reba shared stories from her own childhood about growing up in Oklahoma and learning to sing by listening to the radio. She talked about the importance of education, of staying grounded, and of having people around you who care more about you as a person than as a performer. As they prepared to leave, Reba pulled Emma aside for a private conversation. I want you to know that I don't do this lightly, she said quietly. I meet a lot of talented kids, and I usually just encourage them to keep practicing and maybe call me when they're older. But Sarah Beth is different. She has something that can't be taught, that connection between her heart and her voice that makes people listen. Emma felt tears threatening. I'm scared, she admitted. I want what's best for her, but I don't know anything about the music business. What if I make the wrong choices? That's exactly why you'll make the right choices, Reba replied with certainty. You love her more than you love the idea of her being famous. That's going to protect her better than any contract or manager ever could. Reba handed Emma a business card with her personal contact information. Call me in a few days, after you've had time to think about everything. If you decide you want to move forward with the festival, I'll help you every step of the way. As they walked back to their cars, Sarah Beth chattering excitedly about everything that had happened, Emma realized that their story had taken another impossible turn. A few hours ago, they'd been a struggling single mother and her talented daughter. Now, they were being offered opportunities that could change everything. That evening, after Sarah Beth had finally fallen asleep clutching Reba's autograph and still wearing the clothes from their meeting, Emma sat in her small kitchen and tried to process everything that had happened. Her phone rang, and she was surprised to see Mrs. Rodriguez's number on the caller ID. Mija, the whole trailer park is talking about what happened today, Elena said excitedly. Mrs. Patterson saw it on Facebook. Someone posted a video of Sarah Beth singing in the grocery store, and it's been shared hundreds of times. Emma's eyes widened. She'd been so focused on the conversation with Reba that she'd forgotten about all the people filming with their phones. It's getting thousands of views, Mrs. Rodriguez continued. People are calling her an angel, saying they've never heard anything so beautiful. Emma, I think your little girl is about to become famous. After hanging up, Emma spent an hour reading through the comments on the video that had been shared across social media. The responses were overwhelmingly positive, with people from all over the country expressing amazement at Sarah Beth's talent. Several comments mentioned Reba's presence in the video, and Emma realized that their encounter was attracting attention far beyond what she'd anticipated. Over the next few days, Emma's phone didn't stop ringing. Local news stations wanted to interview Sarah Beth, talent agents were calling with offers, and even some national media outlets had reached out. Emma felt overwhelmed by the sudden attention and decided to follow Reba's advice about taking time to think things through. On Wednesday evening, she finally called the number on Reba's business card. "Emma, honey, I'm so glad you called." Reba's voice was warm and reassuring. "I've been seeing all the attention Sarah Beth's been getting. How are you both handling it?" "It's been overwhelming," Emma admitted. "I never expected anything like this. People are making offers, wanting to interview her, and I honestly don't know what to do." "That's completely normal," Reba said gently. "The important thing is not to rush into anything. Have you thought about the festival?" Emma had thought of little else. "Yes, and Sarah Beth is beside herself with excitement, but I'm terrified of making the wrong choice." "Tell you what," Reba said. "Why don't you come to Nashville this weekend? I'd like you to meet some people, the right people, so you can get a better sense of what Sarah Beth's options might be. No pressure, no commitments, just information." That Saturday, Emma and Sarah Beth drove to Nashville for what would prove to be another life-changing day. Reba had arranged for them to visit several music industry professionals, all of whom had agreed to meet with Sarah Beth after seeing the grocery store video. Their first stop was Susan Walker's studio, where Sarah Beth's voice coach had arranged a meeting with David Chen, a respected artist manager who specialized in working with young performers. "I've been managing artists for 20 years, David said, after listening to Sarah Beth sing 2 songs. "I've never heard raw talent quite like this. But more importantly, I can see that she genuinely loves what she's doing. That passion is what will sustain her through the challenges of building a career." David outlined what professional management would involve: careful career planning, education coordination, legal protection, and gradual introduction to the industry. Emma was impressed by his emphasis on Sarah Beth's well-being and normal childhood development. "The goal wouldn't be to make her famous overnight," David explained. "The goal would be to help her develop her talent properly while protecting her from the potential pitfalls of the music business." Their next meeting was with Rachel Murphy, a producer who had worked with several successful country artists. Rachel's studio was impressive, filled with state-of-the-art recording equipment and gold records on the walls. "Sarah Beth, have you ever been in a recording studio before?" Rachel asked as she gave them a tour. Sarah Beth shook her head, her eyes wide as she took in all the equipment. "Would you like to try recording something, just for fun?" 20 minutes later, Emma was sitting in the control room, listening to her daughter's voice come through the studio speakers with crystal clarity. The recording process seemed to bring out even more nuance in Sarah Beth's singing, and Emma found herself crying as she listened. "She's a natural in the studio," Rachel said quietly to Emma. "Some singers struggle with the technical aspects of recording, but she adapted immediately. That's another sign of exceptional talent." Their final meeting of the day was with Reba herself at the offices of her production company. Reba had invited Tom Bradley, the director of the Children's Music Festival, to join them. "Sarah Beth, I've been organizing this festival for 8 years, Tom said. "We've had some incredibly talented young performers, but I have to say your grocery store performance was something special. Would you be interested in being one of our featured artists?" Sarah Beth looked at her mother, then back at Tom. "What would I have to do?" "You'd perform 3 songs on the main stage," Tom explained. "We'd provide backing musicians if you wanted them, though I suspect you'd be equally impressive with just your guitar once your wrist heals." "When is the festival?" Emma asked. 6 weeks from now, Tom replied, which would give Sarah Beth plenty of time to prepare and for her wrist to heal completely. Emma looked at her daughter, who was practically glowing with excitement. "What do you think, baby girl?" "Mama, I want to do it," Sarah Beth said without hesitation. "I want to sing for all those people." Reba smiled at the child's enthusiasm. "I think that's wonderful. And Sarah Beth, I'd be honored to introduce you to the audience." As they drove home that evening, Emma's mind was spinning with everything they'd learned. The professionals they'd met were legitimate, respected people who seemed genuinely interested in Sarah Beth's artistic development rather than just her commercial potential. "Mama, is this really happening?" Sarah Beth asked from the back seat, her voice dreamy with exhaustion and excitement. "It really is, sweetheart. Are you sure this is what you want?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Sarah Beth replied. "When I was singing in that recording studio, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be." Over the following weeks, Emma found herself navigating a new world of contracts, rehearsal schedules, and media requests. David Chen had agreed to represent Sarah Beth, and his first priority was protecting her from the overwhelming attention while helping her prepare for the festival performance. Sarah Beth's cast came off 3 weeks before the festival, and she immediately threw herself back into guitar practice with renewed determination. Her wrist had healed perfectly, and if anything, the time away from playing had made her more appreciative of her instrument. Susan Walker intensified their voice coaching sessions, working with Sarah Beth on stage presence and performance techniques. The child absorbed every lesson with the focus and dedication of someone much older. "She's ready," Susan told Emma after their final coaching session. "More than ready. She's going to be magnificent." The night before the festival, Emma and Sarah Beth stayed in a Nashville hotel, courtesy of the festival organizers. Sarah Beth was surprisingly calm, spending the evening practicing her 3 songs and talking excitedly about finally performing on a real stage. "Mama, are you nervous?" Sarah Beth asked as they got ready for bed. Emma laughed. "Terrified, but also incredibly proud. You've worked so hard for this moment." "I dreamed about Daddy last night," Sarah Beth said softly. "He told me he'd be watching from heaven and that he was proud of me for following my dreams." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "I know he would be, baby girl. He always believed you were destined for something special." The morning of the festival dawned bright and clear. Emma helped Sarah Beth into her performance outfit, a beautiful blue dress that Reba had insisted on buying for the occasion, paired with cowboy boots that Sarah Beth had chosen herself. At the venue, Emma was amazed by the professional setup. The main stage was impressive, with professional lighting and sound equipment that rivaled what she'd seen on television. Backstage, Sarah Beth was calm and focused, warming up her voice and chatting with the other young performers. Sarah Beth Thompson, a festival volunteer, appeared with a clipboard. "You're up in 10 minutes." This was it, the moment that everything had been building toward. As they walked toward the stage entrance, Emma caught sight of the audience. The venue was packed, with easily 500 people in attendance. She could see families with children, but also adults who were clearly music industry professionals, their attention focused intently on the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," Tom Bradley's voice boomed over the sound system, "our next performer is a very special young lady who's been creating quite a buzz in Nashville. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to a true country music legend, Miss Reba McEntire." The audience erupted as Reba walked onto the stage, her red hair gleaming under the lights. She waited for the applause to die down before speaking into the microphone. "Thank you so much. You know, in my 40-plus years in this business, I've had the privilege of discovering and working with some incredible talent. But a few weeks ago, I had an experience that reminded me why I fell in love with country music in the first place." Reba paused, her gaze finding Emma and Sarah Beth in the wings. "I was in a small-town grocery store when I heard the most beautiful voice I've encountered in years. It belonged to an 8-year-old girl who was singing not for fame or fortune, but simply because music is part of her soul. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Miss Sarah Beth Thompson. The applause was thunderous as Sarah Beth walked onto the stage, her guitar in her hands and a smile that could have lit up the entire venue. She settled onto the stool that had been placed center stage, adjusted her microphone, and looked out at the audience with complete confidence. "Hi everyone," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I'm Sarah Beth and I love country music more than anything in the world. This first song is called Fancy, and it's by my hero, Miss Reba McEntire." As Sarah Beth began to play the opening chords, Emma held her breath. This was it, the moment when her daughter's dreams would either soar or be shattered. But as Sarah Beth began to sing, Emma knew there was no chance of failure. Her daughter's voice filled the venue with power and emotion that seemed impossible from someone so young. The audience was completely still, transfixed by the performance. When Sarah Beth reached the climax of the song, her voice soaring with conviction and passion, the entire venue erupted. People were on their feet, cheering and applauding with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for established stars. Sarah Beth's second song, Angel from Montgomery, showcased a different side of her talent, the ability to convey deep emotion and tell a story through music. By the time she finished her third and final song, The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. As Sarah Beth took her bow, the standing ovation seemed to go on forever. Emma watched from the wings, tears streaming down her face, as her daughter waved to the audience with the poise and grace of a seasoned performer. Reba returned to the stage, her own eyes glistening with emotion. "Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've just witnessed the beginning of something very special. Sarah Beth Thompson. Everyone." Backstage after the performance, Emma and Sarah Beth were surrounded by well-wishers, industry professionals, and other performers. But through it all, Emma kept her focus on her daughter, watching for signs of overwhelm or exhaustion. Instead, Sarah Beth seemed energized by the experience, graciously accepting compliments and talking enthusiastically about the performance with anyone who approached her. "How do you feel, baby girl?" Emma asked during a quiet moment. Sarah Beth's face lit up with pure joy. "Mama, it was everything I dreamed it would be and more. When I was up there singing, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged." As the evening wound down and they prepared to leave the venue, Reba pulled Emma aside for a final conversation. "You know this is just the beginning, right?" she said gently. "After tonight, there are going to be opportunities that you never imagined possible." Emma nodded, feeling both excited and overwhelmed by the prospect. "I just want to make sure we make the right choices for Sarah Beth." "You will," Reba said with certainty, "because you understand what's really important. You're not chasing fame for its own sake. You're nurturing a gift that could bring joy to millions of people." She paused, looking towards Sarah Beth, who was still chatting excitedly with other young performers. "Emma, what happened in that grocery store? What happened here tonight? These aren't just career moments, they're miracles. Sarah Beth has something that can't be manufactured or taught. She has the ability to touch people's hearts through music, and that's the rarest gift of all." As Emma and Sarah Beth drove home through the quiet Tennessee countryside, the child finally succumbed to exhaustion, falling asleep in the back seat with a smile still on her face. Emma drove in peaceful silence, reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. 6 months ago, they had been struggling to pay rent, worried about their next meal, uncertain about their future. Tonight, Sarah Beth had performed on a professional stage, introduced by one of country music's biggest stars, in front of an audience that included some of the most influential people in the music industry. But more than that, Emma realized they had discovered something about the power of dreams, perseverance, and the unexpected ways that life could surprise you. Sarah Beth's talent had been the catalyst, but it was the kindness of people like Mrs. Rodriguez, Jake Morrison, Susan Walker, and Reba McEntire that had turned that talent into opportunity. As they pulled into their trailer park, Emma saw lights on in several of the neighbors' homes despite the late hour. Mrs. Rodriguez emerged from her trailer as soon as Emma's car came to a stop, her face beaming with pride and excitement. "Mija, how did it go?" she asked in a loud whisper, not wanting to wake Sarah Beth. "It was perfect," Emma replied, carefully lifting her sleeping daughter from the back seat. "Absolutely perfect." As she carried Sarah Beth into their small trailer and tucked her into bed, still wearing her performance dress, Emma realized that their story had come full circle. They had started with nothing but dreams and a little girl's extraordinary voice. Now they had something even more precious, the knowledge that miracles could happen to ordinary people in the most unexpected places. The grocery store encounter that had seemed so surreal just weeks ago now felt like destiny. Reba McEntire hadn't just discovered Sarah Beth's talent that day. She had set in motion a chain of events that would transform their lives forever. And as Emma finally settled into her own bed, exhausted but filled with hope for the future, she whispered a quiet thank you to Robert, wherever he was, for passing on his love of music to their daughter. Sarah Beth's dreams were becoming reality, one miraculous moment at a time. The little girl who had sung in a grocery store aisle was on her way to becoming the country music star she had always dreamed of being. And Emma knew that this was just the beginning of their incredible journey.